I'm Bryce Butler from Access Ventures, and this is More Than Profit, a show where I talk with founders, investors, entrepreneurs, and leaders of all kinds about living and working with purpose, how they do it, and why. On this month's episode of More Than Profit, I'm with Lalit Gautam. In 2017, Lalit co-founded SenseGrass, a soil intelligence platform that helps companies and farmers reduce excessive nitrogen and fertilizers from the soils using their patented sensors. It also optimizes crop data through AI to grow better and more sustainably. It improves crop yield and subsequently increases farmer income. And it's worth noting that SenseGrass was a recent winner of the Render competition, a global startup competition to find and invest $100,000 into founders building high-growth companies willing to do so from the Louisville region, which is exciting for me because this was a major part of the regional capital strategy that we at Access Ventures deployed in 2019 to build the entrepreneurial ecosystem with a blended capital strategy. And what's become Render Capital, and even far beyond what I could have ever hoped, is in its third year with the Render competition. It's made 24 investments and moved $2.4 million into startups, and 12 of which willing to relocate to the Midwest to scale their enterprises. So we have a bit to talk about today. But first, again, Lalit, thanks for joining me. And I'd like to kick things off a little bit, with your backstory. Google your name, your LinkedIn profile is super impressive. And, I hesitate to even kind of go down the list of accolades that you've received and awards because it's really phenomenal. But I'd like to dive a little bit, like how did you even come to co-found SenseGrass? Like what about your backstory, your personal story led you to build this impressive company?
Thanks, Bryce. Thanks for having me today here. And I think thank you for this great warm intro as well. And I think this podcast is very important for me for a couple of reasons. I think the first reason is of course, the Render competition. I'm here as a winner. And being an Agtech startup founder, I think this place is very close to me. We have been doing this market research for almost 2 years. And we were looking for this place like Louisville, Kentucky, but also the regions close by. So I think this is going to be fun, but let's come back to the question. And I think it's a very important question for me. And I think one of the biggest motivation why I've started SenseGrass. So I came from a very small city called Jaipur in the state of Rajasthan back in India. And when I born and grew up, I have seen my grandfather used to do farming, in a state of Uttar Pradesh, which is the largest state in India. So I think the first seed, I would say, for SenseGrass has been done 30 years back when I grew up in the farms back in India. And I think that time I never thought I'm going to do something with the Agtech or SenseGrass, something like that. But I think, the kind of destiny. So when I grew up, I've studied Bachelor of Pharmaceutical and Medicine and extended one more year and become a Doctor of Pharmaceutical Science and Medicine. After my grad degree, I work as a stem cell scientist back in the US. I was making the high-end molecules and the drugs for the different diseases. And I think, but it was a good job, high-paying job, but there was no satisfaction. So I decided to go for an MBA because I always believe that business and leadership things can change the world. And I applied for a couple of B schools. I got an admission back in India. And then I have completed my MBA and worked for corporates for 2 years. Again, the satisfaction kind of things was missing. And in 2015, I decided to go into an impact sector. And it was my first startup back in 2015 called HandsCart. And the HandsCart was like a platform to connect the designers and artists to come together and co-create the goods, like services and the goods. And I think that was the first, I would say, the stepping stone in my career that leads me to two things: the impact side, like the social impact, and the technology. It was a huge machine learning platform based on the recommendations to co-create these goods and also provide the income and livelihood to the country like India and other regions as well. After a couple of years, it got sold. That was my first exit. It wasn't big, but it was a decent exit as well. And in the last, the first 3-4 years after MBA, the third thing that connects me to the SenseGrass was I was working as a fellow leader in World Economic Forum, UN, and all these things as a pro bono, leader. And I think the one thing that always excited me was the climate change and the food scarcity, right? And I think the reason why these things excite me because my childhood was spent in a farm, and I have seen how my grandfather sold his large farm because of the low soil toxicity and the low crop yield. And I think that was the time then all the things comes together. My farming, childhood, my study, my undergrad, and my experience, my professional experience in HenScard and post HenScard, where I got a chance to work with the rural communities and the communities in the villages and the different food stakeholder as well. And finally, in 2017, that comes in my mind. In my mind, 2019, we have started developing the research into the product idea. And 2020, finally, we launched the company during the COVID. And just in 1.5 years of operation since we incorporated, we have started getting a lot of responses and positive side. And so this is a journey of the passion plus your experience, and also your entrepreneurship mindset. Because in entrepreneurship, I always see two important things. Whenever you want to start a startup, I always think that founders should look for two things: your passion and your market size, how big is the problem. And with the SenseGrass, I think these two things, we have checklist, these two things in SenseGrass.
That's amazing. And I think what I love, just even about how super thoughtful journey, professionally, just self-awareness around okay, these are my passions, this is my background, saw these things with my grandfather. It's interesting because, our podcast intentionally is more than profit, recognizing, there's more out there than just the financial bottom line profit. And, you clearly live and breathe, ooze social impact. But what I love, and this is what we end up talking a lot of founders about, is it's generally a non-concessionary, meaning we can build high growth scalable companies that are solving massive problems and helping with things like food scarcity or climate change, and these are venture backable businesses that have huge market potential. Because a lot of times, what you may not know about, these markets of Louisville, Kentucky, being from India, but also spending time in the Bay Area, social impact oftentimes gets relegated to the kid table at Thanksgiving, the lesser, because it's you're playing at business, or you're building something that's not as profitable. But you're clearly proving that's not true. You can grow and scale businesses solving massive global challenges, because the market potential is there. Talk to me about that, because I am fascinated to learn about how your understanding of social impact has been shaped over time, and your definition and why that matters to how you're building SenseGrass. SenseGrass is not a nonprofit. You've built a for-profit, venture-backed business solving a massive global problem. So why does that matter as you think about SenseGrass?
No, I think, Bryce, this is an interesting question. And I think I always say one thing to people every time when I go somewhere, that every business and every startup have an impact, in some companies, impact comes as a primary focus, your primary mission of your company. And I think in a lot of businesses, impact is the byproduct. But even if you take an example of the giants like Google and Facebook, when Facebook came, maybe it was a kind of platform to connect to your friends and families, right? To technically, the impact was indirect in terms of empathy, memories, and connecting to your loved ones, right? Whether we talk about Google and all Microsoft as well. And even if you see, and I think the biggest difference in the last few years, what we have seen in these companies is everybody is focusing right now on the impact side. Even if you see the ads for the Google and the strategy of Google, they are focusing more on impact. If their advertisements are focusing more on the empathy and how the human connection works. Same goes with the iPhone and Apple as well. So I think my definition of impact is something that anything that's improved the life of humans, improve the the way you're living and improve the overall society as well. And especially in SenseGrass, like, of course, when we started, like, impact was always in our mind as the primary mission, like one of the strongest pillar of the company. And I think so we are for profit, right? And that's the reason we decided, like, we're not going for non-profit or B Corp. We want to go for the profit as well. And I think, like, there is a lot of discussion going on, in the current scenario, like, capitalist and the, non-profit and socialism. My way of thinking is, like, earning profit or generating income is always good. Like, you have to be focused on generating income and, earning the profit for your businesses. Otherwise, your business won't be successful or sustainable. But like your impact should be always there into that business model. So it's like there's a thin line between, like, a proper business model, non-profit versus a for-profit company, and how you're going to decide your mission and how you're going to make it impactful is important. And I think I'll give you an example of SenseGrass, and I think, like, when we started SenseGrass, we decided our business model or the mission of the company in that way that the impact always comes into the, on the top of the funnel, but and with a very clear business model, like, we generating traction, this amount of 65% of profit margin while impacting the farmers by improving their income or reducing their environmental cost as well. So all both the things comes together very well. So even there, we were, like, very successful in raising the funds from a proper VCs, those who have no impact in their investment thesis, even with the investment funds, those who have impact as the primary thesis in their investment firm. So I think that was kind of the it wasn't strategy, very frankly. It was a very natural way for us. But a lot of time, like, you can come up with a strategy that will bring the impact in your business model as well.
Well, what I and it's just you recognizing your different audiences. Like, there are people that are driven by different things, different motivators in everybody's life, and so you are talking to some investors that really care about the financial returns. Like, great, this is what we're doing. And oh, by the way, we also are providing unbelievable impact to the farmers. And then you have people that really care about that intentional impact. It's great, but we're also getting you this financial return that's meaningful. And so it's just knowing your audience and kind of talking to them in language. Because again, I think sometimes we overcomplicate the impact, meaning, like, if we can simply think about it, it's like, is it measurable, transparent, and intentional? It's like, well, the problem you're solving is very intentional, right? The sustainability, the capacity of small farmers to make a good wage and to restore the soil, clearly, right? And then actually measuring those things is going to be, it's part of your business model. Yep. But then you're also creating jobs, providing return to your investors. All of these things matter. It's a great impact. Love it. So, and the other thing, because I think you mentioned, and I really loved this, like, twofold of, like, passion and market, because your passion can be multiple things. Like, you went to grad school, MBA, undergrad, potentially looking at pre-med. So you're clearly driven, clearly intelligent, and those are passions, And so I think passion about technology. First company was in the blockchain space, so. So I think the passions can be multifaceted, meaning I'm passionate about building interesting technology that impacts people's lives. I'm passionate about helping farmers. I'm passionate about supporting the communities in which I was born from. So those are my passions. But also I'm passionate about building a business. Like that challenge is quite exciting for an entrepreneur. But then the market size, and I think that's the other thing about social impact. It's like, look, when you look at India specifically, with over 80% of farming is small shareholder farms, like, the ability for you to impact those farmers and provide better quality incomes or higher incomes or whatever, huge. Like, and so that market size is also massive. That's just India. I mean, that was the thing we were talking about before the podcast. So I think oftentimes we confuse these terms like social impact or impact investing, and it's really simply, where are you passionate? Where's their market possibility? Sometimes the business model is a nonprofit because we still need to provide services to people that are less fortunate. But oftentimes it can be a scalable for-profit doing really cool things.
Exactly. I'm like, it's the way, how do you see this thing? Like, I'm like, you gave an example of nonprofit. I'm like, nonprofit also generate the revenue, right? It's just like they distribute the revenue is in a different way.
Yes.
You cannot, like, have the income. So So it's like, every business have the impact and every business have the profit model, like, generating the revenue. So every business have both these sides of things, right? It's just like, how do you want to see this and how do you want to present this to your audience is the most important things what matters to individual or an organization base as well.
Correct. Yeah, and who's the customer? Like, there's clearly a farmer that can benefit from the services you're providing, and if they can afford it, then there's a customer that can pay for that service. But on the other end, the customer of a homeless shelter or a food kitchen, they're not paying for it, and so, but there still is a responsibility of foundations to support that. So again, business models, sustainability is different. So I love that. But I am curious. Okay, so growing up, grandfather, obviously. What person, like who, is there anybody in particular that's been a part of your story in really shaping how you think about the world, business, any mentors or individuals or organizations even that have really inspired your thinking?
No, I think that's an important part of my life. So I would start from my parents, like especially my dad and mom. So we came up from like in a very highly value driven family, right? Where they've always taught. I mean, I think, and I think that's important for me to share here. Like my parents, like especially my dad, always told me like, use your money. Like like whenever you raise the funds, every time when he see the newspaper and articles like, hey, startup have raised like 10 millions, 50 millions, and these startups are not doing well. Spending a lot of things on the unnecessary things as well. So he always told me like one thing that use and consider this amount, like this money as your own money, your father's money, and use it wisely, right? Make one, like, $3 out of $1, make the impact to the people. So I think these kind of, very basic but important things that came from my, in my genes from my parents, right? And I think these are like, because I was very small when I saw my grandfather. So I wasn't like, I didn't see him for a long period of time, but I've seen my parents, my dad and mom, and how they have left their ancestral house and moved back to this large city capital of India. So I think these were the one who have always told me about the stories, the struggles, and all this stuff as well, and how they have moved from their main place and become an expat in the same their own country. And I think when I also moved after my undergrad, like to abroad, like first in Europe and then in US, I have seen this same kind of challenges. Like, and I think when you have and in India, there's a one line, and I'm sure this line is everywhere, is the necessity is the mother of invention, right? So when you become, when you think that, when you see the problem, when you live the same population, and I always say one thing with sense grass, I have lived the problem. I'm a part of the population which I'm solving for. So I think these are the thing. And after like in the last couple of years, I've met really good people as well, like in terms of the mentors and advisors who have helped us a lot, who gave a lot of like guidance. And even in the program, like I met you, Patrick, and other people as well, like who always gave like these people are like very. And I think for me, the importance of the human and importance of the network is always important, right? Because these people are the one who always give you, like, maybe they will give you very simple, a tip or a suggestion, but it will last long for your entire life, right? You will always remember that one person have told me about this thing, and it always useful in your life as well. So I think these are few things as well. In terms of companies as well, like, the recent example, Patagonia, I was following this company, like, since I was kid. Like, I have also watched some of the stuff from Patagonia as well. And recently they have given the entire company for the climate change. So these are like really some good examples that motivate people like me, people like, the other social entrepreneurs as well in the market. So I think there's like a chain and series of people, incident, and the organization who have always motivated me to keep doing this work, like whatever I'm doing right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, and so you mentioned earlier too, like your path to the render competition. And if you want to learn, this isn't a podcast for that, but to learn more, you can go to render.capital/competition. But it clearly is. I mean, the purpose of that program that we initiated was to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem, to say, what are the assets of this region? How do we align the investment theses, and how do we find companies that can say, hey, wait a minute, like I could actually benefit from being here because of these aligned assets, right? And it's not Silicon Valley, so we don't have the capital stack like Andreessen and Sequoia, but what we do have is, logistics hubs and access to farming and other things. So for you, help. I think what I'd love to know is like your understanding. How did you actually assess market opportunity? Because I think sometimes entrepreneurs don't maybe think as thoughtfully about those things as well. They're just grinding. And so for you, what did that look like, and where do you hope that takes you over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
No, yeah, exactly. So I think what I've briefly mentioned in the starting of the podcast, I came from like in a small city, right? And when I was in Jaipur, which is my hometown, people have invited me, hey, why don't you come to Bangalore, the Silicon Valley of India? Why don't you come to Delhi and Mumbai? There's a huge scope here, like you can do it alone. But I think like I have grew up, in the city of Jaipur, and I have built all these company from there, like including SenseGrass as well. Like all idea came from there, right? And I always believe like I'm always a big fan of small cities, very frankly, like small towns. The reason is like, very simple. The logic behind this is like there is a huge potential, of growing there, right? Because the big companies, of course, you have funds, you have resources, you have people there, but small cities, when I say small, and I'm not talking about in terms of the space or the population, but in terms of like, the limited resources. So they always have like, kind of a potential to grow. Like you have problems to solve, you have people very well connected, so you can easily reach out to the people as well. And let's coming back to the, like, to render competition. And I think I told you in start as well, we were doing this research for almost like 1 to 2 years. Like we are very sure, and we have a very deep market research about our product, like our market, Kentucky and the other neighboring states, and also the Midwest region entirely. And as I told you, like the one of the impact area of the SenseGrass is to impact the small to mid scale farmers, right? And in US, like if you see the California where we came from, and even the other parts of Midwest, they have relatively large farm, 3,000 acre, 2,000 acres farms, very corporate farms as well. And like these are good to generate the businesses very quickly as well, but is equally like sometimes is equally hard to to coordinate with them as well. So I think the first reason is like being like in a small town or a small ecosystem, it's very easy. Our right market is this actually. So we want to impact the small to mid scale farmer, even though we are selling to agro enterprises, but we want to impact the small to mid scale farmer. We want to work with them. And if I'm able to work with the small mid scale farmer, which is 80% of the farms in the state of Kentucky, I can easily connect the same model with in India, in Africa, or any such similar regions as well, right? So it's for me, it's very easy for me not to adjust with my mission or with my business model while working in the California or in other region as well. And I think the second thing you have already mentioned, that the people are very well connected. They are warm, right? You can make easily connection. They have other resources which can easily grow. And maybe after like couple of years, when you think that, you reach to a point of saturation in terms of like funding and scaling and all, you can easily, I have seen a lot of great companies, those who have based out in the cities like this, even from my city back in India, they reach to the unicorn level. We have one company in India which reached the unicorn level, and a sustainable, unicorn in terms of revenue, and they come from the same city as well. So I think like maybe it's just like if you're not going to the numbers, but there's an equal potential of, becoming the large company even from a small town as well.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think you hit on it with, it's interesting because you and I were talking before the podcast about just the potential. If you can build it here, you can build it in India, Africa, South America. A lot of the problems these farmers face are the same. And it's, how do I provide a good wage for my family on a small acreage to where I don't have to move or sell, or and we're talking like really small margins. And so the slightest thing, the slightest advantage they can have, and oftentimes that's technology, can really be hugely impactful. It can be the difference between them being able to stay and provide for their families or having to sell. And I think in communities like Kentucky, where that historically has been through tobacco as a product, there's always this like, how do we maintain that farming heritage, family farming heritage? Otherwise, we're going to lose out to, like you said, these big commercial farms, and I think we are well positioned to kind of, I think, provide that if we really care, if we really care to see that as the future and the opportunity as a massive global potential. So kudos to you for that. So as you think about SenseGrass and, for the next 2 to 3 years, or even next 12 months, it doesn't have to be that far out, but like, what are you really pressing forward, and what are the challenges that you're tackling right now? What help do you need to help get to achieve the goals that you have set for you and your company in the near term to get to the point of scale that is pretty catalytic?
No, I think that's another important thing, and I think the time we all are living in this, in this era, I think is a very important time for us as human, and it's equally important time for our planet as well, right? We have seen COVID for almost 2 years, and I think after COVID, this is the first time we are living in a normal world. I hope this is a living in normal world, and we have also seen the war as well, and Ukraine used to be one of the best place to grow the healthy food. So we have already 50% of our land and soil has become infertile, right? The prices of fertilizers has been very high in the last 3-4 years. And I think this impact and I think this blessing in disguise kind of stuff is always useful for us, but we definitely do not see the profit in the problems, right? So, but I think I would answer this question, let's talk about the challenges first. And I think I would say the first challenge is we have to scale, right? We have to reach out to more and more farms. We need to bring more and more people, more and more farms on the platform, because more farms we have, more land we have in our system, we can give them more precise recommendations and analytics, right? So it's so the first rule of the data science and the machine learning is more data you have, more user you have, your predictions and recommendation usually high, right? So I think this is the one thing. So I won't call it challenge, but this is definitely one of our requirement as well. And I think we want to impact more and more farms, small to mid scale farms in this region. The second is definitely the right resources, the hiring, right? For a very I think behind every successful startup, there is a very strong team. A strong team of co-founders, strong team of your employees. And I think a market like this, it's easy and relatively for you to work closely with your team as well. You can hire affordable team members, you can work closely with them and in a same office, and maybe you can go and hang out and have fun as well. And I think this is second thing, and the second challenge, we are looking for the right people. We haven't got the right team yet.
What type of so for you at this stage, what does that look like? What roles specifically, skill sets are you looking for?
Yeah, we're definitely looking for one co-founder in the team. We have two co-founder. The one is it's kind of in a smaller stake, mostly taking care of the tech side. I'm the one who's taking care of all the non-tech and operational side. So we definitely look for one co-founder who's going to be more a non-tech guy, operational and business development. And I would be very happy if we find someone from Louisville and Kentucky or nearby area, right? Because we're looking for the local person who have seen and who know this market very well. Apart from the founding member, we're looking for couple of hires in the next few months. The one would be business development head, the account executives and sales executives, to taking care and talk to the farms as well. And the ones the full stack engineers as well. So there are 3-4 hirings which we're planning to hire in the next few months, and most probably is going to be in the city. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, man, I wish you all the best and I'm excited. There's a lot of stuff I just want to connect with you personally on, because it's so awesome. My head's spinning on just gosh, where were you 5 years ago when we had the first in the nation Ag Accelerator? But everything in its time. So I think the time is now to really build an interesting ecosystem. So thank you for your time today. And how can people learn more, follow along on your story?
It's very easy to follow. You can find me on LinkedIn with Lalit Gautam. You can also drop me in text Lalit@sensecast.com. And I think that's the best way to connect. And thank you, Bryce. Thanks for having me here. It was fun chat with you, and I'm very excited to be in the city.
To learn more about SenseGrass and to stay up to date on their progress, check out sensegrass.com. And if you'd like to learn more about the Render competition or Render Capital more broadly and the ways it supports founders through investment, please check out render.capital, where you can learn about investment, their We Funder Match program, their First Dollar initiative for founders of color, and of course, the Render competition, which will be launching applications for next year sometime in late Q1 2023. As always, thanks for listening, and stay up to date by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, drop us a review so others can find us as well. More Than Profit is a production of Access Ventures. Direction, design, and editing is done by our friends at Render, a public benefit innovation studio in Louisville, Kentucky. To learn more about their work, check out workwithrender.com. As always, I'm Bryce Butler with Access Ventures. Thanks for listening.